Facebook School of Innovation India aims to build talent in Facebook developer technologies by creating awareness and bringing content to ambitious students in India. This year's focus is on Spark AR. Science fiction, the thing that has kept us awake with many movies and books when we grew up. A lot was promised: flying cars, ray guns, and teleportation. A lot that has not panned out just yet. But there is one key technology that promises to tie fiction to reality, quite literally. As we step into a new decade, we see the applications and experiences we've been using from the past few years greatly transformed by several new technologies, and specifically of which AR, or augmented reality, promises to be one of the most exciting changes. AR is no longer science fiction, it's happening now, right around you. The biggest companies in the world are working hard to make it possible, from Facebook to Google, Apple to Amazon. It's already started to impact the lives of many such as frontline workers, and soon probably yours too. Curious how? Let's get right to it. Augmented reality, the basics. Let's start with the basics. When it comes to immersive experiences, you might have heard of a few terms floating around. The two most important to consider are virtual reality, which is VR, and augmented reality, which is AR. VR in a nutshell takes you anywhere. Just wear a device, usually called a headset or a head-mounted device, HMD, and you will be transported to a virtual world ranging from a meditative forest to a high adrenaline game played in outer space. Imagination is truly the limit, as VR promises a parallel reality altogether. Augmented reality, in a nutshell, brings anything to you. Augmented reality superimposes a computer-generated image on a user view of the real world. Here, the user either wears a headset or uses a handheld device, generally a smartphone, which lets them see the real world through it, with a digital element augmented on top, forming a composite view. Such experiences can even be social, with several users being present in the same space, consuming the same augmented content. And remember, augmented reality is not virtual reality. There's a huge gap between the two. Virtual reality is the technology that enables you to place yourself in a digital computer-generated world and simulate or mimic the real world, whereas augmented reality does away with the computer-generated world and instead places generated 3D objects directly in our environment. To experience VR, you'll need special head-mounted displays or customized hardware which takes over your vision and hearing to place you in a virtually generated world that simulates the real world. But to use AR, all you need is a device that contains a camera and the ability to generate content which you can place in the real world. Google Glass, which was one of the first devices to do this by letting you view and interact with digital content with a spectacle-like device on your face. There's a better way to experience AR, and that's with the device you already carry around with you every day, your smartphone. The best example of using AR on your phone is the gaming sensation Pokemon Go. The smartphone game by Niantic Labs lets you place digitally created creatures into the real world and lets you interact with them. Not heard about this? Let's make it even simpler. You might have seen a lot of filters on Instagram, Messenger, or Facebook. These filters can range from simple kind, such as adjusting how your photo looks, to more sophisticated ones, such as placing dog ears on your face. Yes, face filters is one part of augmented reality as a concept. These are just another form of augmented reality where instead of placing objects in the real environment, they place digitally created objects directly over your face. At its core, this is what augmented reality is. But where did AR really begin? Now that we know the basics of what AR really is, you might be thinking that it's a recent technology that came straight out of sci-fi. You'd be wrong. Augmented reality, much like a lot of frontier computing methods, has been around for decades. Let's take a quick look at its many forms, shall we? The first concept of augmented reality comes from L. Frank Baum in 1901. He mentions an idea of using electronic displays in order to overlay additional data over the real world. The first release concept brings to Ivan Sutherland in 1968 when he created the first HUD gear called Sword of Damocles. And thus, AR and VR were created as working concepts. It took a couple of decades more for the technology to catch up. Until 1999, AR software and hardware was mostly used for academic purposes in very specific industry settings. This changed with the release of AR Toolkit, the first open source software platform for AR, and featured a 3D tracking library using black and white images or fiducial markers, which are similar to QR codes, which could readily be printed on a regular laser printer. Fiducial markers are heralded as a big boost for fundamental AR. They make it extremely easy to attach virtual elements to physical world objects, relying only on computer vision algorithms and minimal real-world intrusion. An AR-enabled device would look for the marker in the real world using its camera and place the virtual element on it. Let's now look at the importance of the camera, shall we? As you might have noticed, when the markers were invented to place the object in the real world, the AR device relied heavily on the camera to find the marker. This contributed to a leap in the development of cameras for AR, as by the end of the 1990s, reliable webcams were given on most computing devices, and in the 2000s, there was a surge in mobile devices. It would only be a matter of time until handheld devices capable of AR were developed. All through this, the piece of the puzzle that gave away for the breakthrough was the camera. A camera on the AR-enabled device ensured that it could see the real world, therefore blending the real world with the virtual elements, and with the smartphones getting better and cameras every cycle, we soon have a seamless way to interact with digital elements in the real world with AR. What lies ahead for augmented reality? Now that we've seen what came before, we must take a look at what lies ahead for augmented reality. The current limits that plague a widespread adoption of true AR are power advancements, display technology, and of course, wearable devices. In their current state, we all agree modern smartphones normally don't last long enough on a single charge. Imagine the toll running a full-fledged AR app would take on your phone's battery. The device has to perform the necessary calculations on the device, all while detecting your world from the camera and then simultaneously keeping track of all the digital objects in it. Spoiler alert, it doesn't stand a chance. But wait, that's not all. There's still the issue of most portable devices have on them, which is not having enough resolution or not being portable enough to carry around with us. Once again, although even the largest smartphones fit in our pockets, any larger would make them unwieldy. Tablet devices have larger displays but sacrifice portability. Last but not the least, even though a single smartphone now has more computing power than NASA when sending people to the moon, the most prevalent devices still can't keep up with complex AR and VR experiences as smoothly as a gaming computer. If we assume that all of these issues will be solved in the coming years, we can expect AR to open up a new form of computing called spatial computing, with mounted device like spectacles being worn by the user and all the interactions happening on it, either with gestures or voice. This is the future we're heading for with AR. We're already close to the scenario with AR headsets like Magic Leap, Nreal, Microsoft coming out with new innovations every year. It won't be too long before we achieve a true form of spatial computing. But now that you know all of this, how can you be a part of it? You've learned about how augmented reality evolved from the Sword of Damocles to smartphones, and you might even feel overwhelmed by how large the extent of AR is. But don't worry about that. In this course, you'll learn how to create AR experiences that are just as extremely immersive with just your smartphone and a computer. You also won't have to worry about sharing it with people since you'll be sharing it on Facebook and Instagram directly. All of this with Facebook's Spark AR Studio.